Man who killed and dismembered wife gets fatally shot by Michigan State Police. Get ready to dive into an exciting story that will have you on the edge of your seat about tragedy and justice. Imagine a community that was shocked to learn the horrifying truth about a woman's terrible murder after she vanished. How did an apparently normal marriage turn into a violent, dishonest nightmare? What finally caused a spouse to commit such horrible crimes? And how did the police manage to bring him to justice? Come along as we piece together the terrifying tale of a manhunt, a standoff, and the unwavering search for the truth in the face of evil. Are you prepared to discover the unexpected turns and twists that are in store? The town was left in a state of shock and bewilderment at the disappearance and subsequent discovery of the mutilated corpses, which instilled a general feeling of fear and unease. The residents struggled to come to terms with the idea that a killer was among them, giving a deadly twist to what had at first appeared to be a tragic but isolated tragedy. As more and more information from the inquiry became available, the neighbors' sense of dread grew as they realized that someone who could commit such heinous acts of violence could be residing among them. Questions like, who could have committed such a heinous act, hung over the neighborhood like a dark cloud. What could have possibly pushed them to such lengths? Was anyone else in jeopardy? Residents of the suburb found themselves locking their doors, fearfully peering over their shoulders, and wondering if they would ever genuinely feel safe again as dread tightened its grip. Law enforcement, meanwhile, put in endless hours to put the puzzle together, going through evidence, speaking with witnesses, and pursuing every lead in their pursuit of justice. However, despite their best efforts, the reason for the crime remained a mystery, frustrating investigators and raising anxiety in the community. The once close-knit neighborhood was left devastated and reeling after such a senseless and awful event, dealing with the repercussions of a crime that would haunt them for years to come. A shadow of shock and horror over what was formerly thought to be an apparently normal marriage was cast over the town when it was revealed that the victim's husband had been named as the culprit. The accused appearance, and the person they believed to be familiar with each other left friends, neighbors, and even family members struggling with a deep sense of doubt. How could someone who had seemed like a dedicated partner and loving husband all those years ago be capable of such horrific violence? The query sent a shockwave through the neighborhood's sleepy streets, leaving the locals stunned. As information about the couple's tumultuous history surfaced, a horrifying picture of domestic abuse and control emerged, illuminating the toxic relationships that had long been kept under wraps. The revelation was both perplexing and terribly disconcerting for those who knew the victim and her husband. It made them face the difficult truth that even seemingly perfect relationships can have dark secrets. A sense of will to pursue justice for the victim and hold the offender accountable for his horrific acts, however, was present throughout the shock and bewilderment. As the husband became the prime suspect, the community prepared for a challenging journey ahead, knowing that bringing the case to a close would be a journey filled with suffering, uncertainty, and heartbreak. However, they never wavered in their resolve to respect the victim's memory or make sure that the darkness that had consumed her would not quiet her voice in their pursuit of justice and the truth. Law enforcement agencies accelerated their efforts to catch the offender, who was identified as the victim's husband, causing dread and anxiety in the community. Roadblocks were erected all around the area, helicopters were flying overhead, and K-9 units were searching through thick woodlands in an attempt to find the runaway. Residents were asked to stay alert and notify authorities of any sightings or strange activities as the search got more intense. Knowing that he would soon be apprehended, the accused withdrew to a secluded cabin tucked away in the woods in the hopes of avoiding discovery and blending into the surrounding landscape. Law enforcement authorities carried out a thorough search over several days, pursuing leads and tracking down any potential sightings in an unwavering quest for justice. When the fugitive's whereabouts was finally determined, their efforts paid off, and as Michigan State Police approached the cabin with firearms drawn and tensions running high, a violent standoff followed. In an effort to get in touch with the suspect, negotiators urged him to give himself up amicably in order to stop more violence. However, as hostilities grew and the standoff stretched on, it became more and more obvious that a peaceful ending was unlikely. The neighborhood held its breath, waiting for the tense end to the standoff, as the sun sank below the horizon and darkness enveloped the woodland. A deadly gunfight broke out during the standoff between the fugitive and Michigan State Police when talks broke down and tensions reached an all-time high. Law enforcement officials prepared for the worst in the anxious moments before the deadly clash. knowing that things might easily get out of hand at any time. The fugitive refused to give up and escalated the situation to the point where there was no turning back. Despite their best attempts to settle the standoff amicably, shots were fired during the ensuing wild rush, resounding across the forest as bullets flew and an adrenaline-fueled mayhem overtook the scene. The fugitive lay fatally wounded, his reign of terror brought to an abrupt and terrible end when the smoke cleared and the dust fell. Even nevertheless, concerns about what may have led a man to such extremes, and if the tragedy could have been prevented, persisted even after the fatal encounter. One thing was plainly evident as the community struggled to deal with the aftermath of the deadly gunshot exchange. The toll that violence, both physical and emotional, had taken on had permanently altered the course of everyone's life. The horrific events leading up to the murder, abduction, and ensuing standoffs served as a potent and moving reminder of the terrible toll that domestic abuse takes on victims, families, and entire communities. Following the terrifying experience, the community was left in shock, trying to come to terms with the terrible fact that such heinous acts of violence could happen inside the boundaries of relationships that appeared to be normal. The victim's account demonstrated how abuse may develop and worsen behind closed doors, frequently out of sight, and highlighted how ubiquitous and sneaky it can be. It disproved long-held notions and preconceived notions about who can be a victim and who can commit domestic abuse, forcing society to face up to the unpleasant realities about how often domestic violence is. The incident was a wake-up call that prompted painful discussions about the telltale indications of abuse, the value of providing assistance to survivors, and the pressing need for social reform to address the underlying causes of violence. A newfound sense of solidarity and will to confront domestic violence, end the cycle of abuse, and establish a society where everyone feels secure, respected, and powerful in their own homes emerged as the community dealt with the aftermath of the tragedy. Communities pledged to remember the victim's memory by working non-stop to make sure that no one else would experience a similar tragedy and that survivors would get the assistance and justice they deserve through activism, education, and support. The terrible events that transpired serve as a sobering reminder that domestic violence is a widespread and extremely concerning problem that has an impact on people, families, and communities all around the world. Merely mourning the lives lost or expressing anger at the offender's behavior is insufficient. It is imperative that we turn our fury into constructive action. This calls for coordinated action on several fronts. Prioritizing education and awareness-raising campaigns is crucial. If we want people to recognize the telltale symptoms of abuse and know how to get help if they or someone they care about is in danger, we can empower people to identify abuse and take action to protect themselves and their loved ones by ending the taboo around domestic violence and promoting open discourse. In addition, we need to push for institutional structural reform. In order to safeguard survivors and make offenders responsible for their crimes, this involves advocating for stricter laws and regulations. In addition, we must seek to demolish the mindsets and societal frameworks that support and encourage domestic abuse, such as victim blaming, gender inequality, and cultural norms that downplay or excuse assault. It is critical to provide survivors support services top priority in addition to lobbying and education. In order to support survivors' recovery and life reconstruction, this involves giving them access to safe housing, legal counsel, and other services. We can guarantee that survivors have the assistance they require to leave abusive relationships and proceed in the direction of a better future by funding these services. Everyone must work together, individuals, communities, governments, and organizations, to put an end to domestic abuse. It necessitates a dedication to confronting detrimental attitudes and actions, assisting survivors, and holding offenders responsible. Together, we can make a society in which everyone may live without fear of abuse and where domestic violence is never accepted. The horrific circumstances surrounding the murder, abduction, and ensuing standoffs serve as a sobering reminder of how urgently domestic abuse in our society has to be addressed. This terrifying experience has shown the terrible effects that abuse has on people, individuals, families, and entire communities. It is a call to action for all of us to end the cycle of abuse, speak out against domestic violence, and work toward a society in which every person feels respected, safe, and in control of their own home. Education, advocacy, and support services for survivors should be given top priority, so that we can all work together to bring about significant change and make sure that no one else experiences the same fate. Let's pay tribute to the victim's memory by putting our collective outrage into practice and working to end domestic abuse once and for all. Join us in our mission to raise awareness and take action against domestic violence. Subscribe to our channel to stay informed and be part of the movement to create a safer and more compassionate world for all.